Boy not only took his pet to the table, but also licked the rice out of his bowl. When she heard this, her mother immediately glared at her grandfather, thinking that he had passed on his bad habits to her son. Jack's parents went abroad when he was born and left him in the care of his grandfather, who was in his 70s. In their spare time, they would fly kites in front of the Forbidden City. But he was getting old, and after a while, he felt exhausted and had to rest on his tricycle. Jack knew it was an old habit of his and turned his head to remind him to take his medicine. Grandpa smiled and reassured Jack that he was just tired, but Jack was still uneasy and offered to take him home on the tricycle. Seeing that Grandpa did not agree, so he proposed a boxing match to determine the winner. Until the cloth of his little hand covered the fist of his big hand, Jack bent down like a gentleman and invited Grandpa to get on the tricycle. Jack was red in the face the whole way, even though his butt wouldn't fit on the seat of the tricycle. When people around him saw Jack pedaling, they all praised him for being a good boy. When he got home, Jack would help his grandpa with the chores around the house. He'd step on the bench to wash the dishes, and he'd hang out the sheets in the living room. And when he was done, the two of them would sit in the living room and watch TV. Maybe the cartoons are too good. Jack couldn't help but use his facial expressions. His mischievous grandfather, watching him intently, purposely blocked his view with a bedsheet. Jack immediately fought back. The two of them played happily in the living room. The sound of laughter fills this loving house. It's a happy and cozy life. Before he went to bed at night, Grandpa told Jack that his mom had to go back to China for work. The next day he put on his post office uniform. He's been retired for years, but he's still got a lot to offer. When he found out that he was going to deliver the mail today, Jack wanted to go with him, but delivering mail is hard work. Grandpa refused to let him go for fear of tiring him out, but Jack suddenly jumped out of bed and found a box of pills in his jacket. It turned out Jack didn't want to go alone. He was just worried about his grandfather. Grandpa looked at his pampered grandson and agreed to go. However, the trip made him sick. A few days later, Jack came to pick him up with a balloon. In the hospital room, Grandpa heard Jack's voice from afar. Out of mischief, he hurried back to bed. When Jack came into the hospital room, no matter how much he shouted, he didn't move. Jack was so scared that he dropped the balloon and called out for the doctor in a crying voice. Jack was about to run out of the room. Grandpa couldn't hold back his laughter any longer, so he sat up and said he was just teasing him. This explanation made Jack cry even harder. He couldn't be coaxed. He was so afraid that Grandpa would leave suddenly. When he got home, Jack was still angry. Grandpa apologized and said, "I'll never do that again." Jack suddenly jumped on him and hugged him, crying and begging him not to die. Not long after that, Jack's mom came home. The two of them arrived at the airport early to meet her. Jack had dressed up for the occasion, but when his mom appeared in front of him, he frowned. He couldn't say mom for the life of him. The next day at breakfast, Jack brought a Dutch pig to the table as usual. Mom's face turned sour. She told Jack to take the cage down, but Jack had a different story to tell. Grandpa came out just in time to see the darkness between mother and son and carried the cage under the table without moving. Later that night, he heard Jack's mother sobbing uncontrollably, and he realized it was time for him to leave. He offered to move back to his old house to give his daughter-in-law and grandson some space to bond. No one knew how much he was carrying behind this decision. Grandpa carried a great deal of sadness and heartache. On the night of New Year's Eve, the two adults were crying in the living room. Jack came home from school and couldn't find his grandfather. Mom brought in a bunch of toys to try to get Jack's attention, but all Jack could think about was his grandfather. Mom told him he'd moved back to the old house. Jack was furious when he found out. He thought his mom had driven him away. He ran in the direction of Grandpa's house. Grandpa was sitting on the couch listening to Jack's tape recorder with a smile on his face, hanging the wind chime on Jack's door. Then there was a knock at the door. Grandpa was about to get up and open the door when he heard Jack's voice. He heard Jack's voice and his heartbreaking cries broke his heart. He came to the door trembling. Outside the door, Jack cried out for Grandpa to come home with him, but he didn't open the door. He just stood there and explained that he was coming home and that it wasn't Mom's fault. He told Jack to do as he was told and go home with his mom. Jack cried and told Grandpa, "I'm a good boy. I'm a good boy. I'm a good boy. Remember to take your medicine." The child's cries shook the two adults. Listening to his words, they wept silently inside and outside the house.